That's not a bad thing to speak in.
I don't have a whole much to add to what's already been said. But when I think of Jane, above and beyond her incisive intellect, the term that comes to my mind was empathetic. Was empathetic. Was it better? Okay. And I just wanted to read a part of a letter that she wrote me in 2012. She was talking about her perspective on life. And she said, this is quoting from her letter, "The first and most important question is, what makes you happy? I frequently ask myself this question when I'm stuck in a rut or I'm not pleased with the way things are going. What makes me happy? Besides eating chocolate, lazing in bed with a book, and enjoying the sun. It seems paradoxical that I'm happiest after accomplishing a task, and the more difficult the task is, the more elated I feel from accomplishing it." And that was, I think, Jane, in a brief, incisive way. And that's really all I have to say, but I wanted to thank you, Jeff, her beloved husband, for this beautiful tribute to her.
Thank you very much. Next, we're going to hear from Ron Saldarini, who was, if I have this right, president of Letterly Labs when Jane was there.
Letterly vaccines.
Sorry, vaccine.
But I appreciate expanding the role. A lot of this will be redundant. Many of you. I'm sorry, can you hear me now? This will be redundant for some of the people from Letterly. The rest of you will have to struggle with it to some degree because you really had to live the environment to really understand what was going on. But it's nice to see so many old friends and colleagues, and they've come to celebrate Jane's life. Jeff said earlier in his invitation that Jane was a remarkable individual. And indeed she was. And ingrained in my own memory was the important role she played in bringing our first new product to the marketplace as a Letterly Vaccines unit. Letterly Biologicals hadn't had a product that was new for probably well over 25 years. So this was a substantial undertaking in so many ways, and to understand the impact of Acelymmune, what that new product meant to us on our developing business, a brief review of the mid to late 80s is warranted. Without Acelymmune, I can easily say we would not have evolved into the company we ultimately became. So let me say, or review some of the challenges Jane met and she mastered along the way. If memory serves, and these days that's not such a sure bet for me, Letterly Vaccines, or biologicals as we often refer to them, were struggling to fulfill a future of vaccines that was promised to Cyanamid's, the parent company's, executive committee in 1986. For those of you who were at that meeting, and there were a few here, you may recall that we were given permission to set up a separate business unit within the framework of the Letterly establishment. This was quite a novelty. It had never been done before in the medical group. For those, the unit was to function with its own supervision, separate from the medical research division and from Letterly Pharmaceuticals. We were not yet genealogically removed the Pfizer vaccines, which we are today. We were perceived as sort of an underachieving stepchild. This organizational change was not welcome. It wasn't welcomed by the medical research division. It definitely was not welcomed by Letterly Pharmaceuticals. And in some quarters, there was just plain hostility. We also inherited as a business unit a considerable amount of old baggage, old problems, especially vaccine lawsuits, of which we had some $20 or $30 million outstanding. We had all required a significant time commitment on the part of our staff. We also had no new products on the horizon. A review of our 5-year budget projections in those early years would make us the mother of all hockey sticks. For those of you who have ever put a budget together, you know what I mean when I talk about a hockey stick. Our CEO, our CFO told us that hockey stick budgets were unacceptable and would be dead on arrival. The R&D monetary request we included in our first budget projection was 30% of our total revenue. Unheard of, not only within the framework of Cyanamid's medical group, but pretty much throughout the industry. 30% is a big chunk, but we needed to play catch up. The R&D, we needed something to build on. We needed something new. We needed to have a future. And I believe, and Frank will correct me later, Frank Cano suggested Takeda Pharmaceuticals had a pertussis component that produced much less in the way of adverse reactions than our existing product, which was really quite old. He suggested we should license it from Takeda. All we needed was company support from Cyanamid, from Letterly Japan, one of our joint ventures abroad, and Takeda. A step everyone we all knew would be hard won. Tony Soprano might have said, forget about it. So who would lead this charge? This really very dour atmosphere, enter Jane Scott. She was the clear choice to head up the project. She had the scientific background without question, and as my grandchildren would put it, she was whip smart. Okay? She was a great listener. Importantly, she was culturally sophisticated and had excellent expository skills, and she worked well on her feet. She could handle anything. She could, and Jane, one other thing you have to know about her, and you all seem to know, Jane gravitates to a challenge, or gravitated to a challenge like a moth to a flame. So if our vaccine, and we all knew that if our vaccine, our effort with Acelymun, our effort with this new product, could effectively be developed, several good things might happen for this new company, this new business unit. First would be peer recognition. At the FDA, there were certain circles at the FDA who referred to us as letterly food, because we had not really done very much in the vaccine business for a number of years. So peer recognition would have been helpful. To some extent, we hope that the quality effort put into licensing this sophisticated product would diminish the animus the FDA had for us. They were somewhat unhappy with our position regarding their proposed regulatory changes for Aurimune. Successful launch would also have the benefits of keeping our unit from being transferred back to the Medical Research Division and to Letterly Pharma. These were the undertones of our business. This was the quiet, laid-back environment that your wife, Jeff, your mom, your grandchildren, your mother immersed herself in. To say that Jane shouldered an enormous load is a significant understatement. Instead of looking for another job, something many of us might have done, and she was undeterred. She met the problem with characteristic aplomb. And now a word about Jane and our executive management. No woman had ever managed a global project in Cyan. In fact, no woman had ever made it to the executive suite at that time. Executive management at Letterly Japan and Takeda were male enclaves. Selection of a woman to run the project truly represented a sea change in organizational etiquette. She was not a medical doctor. She had no or limited experience in running a clinical trial or even being aware of what was entailed in a clinical trial. And she would have to meet with prominent Japanese clinicians who ran departments and who were godlike in the way all the people that worked for them worked with them. It was literally, you didn't open your mouth unless the department chairman said it was okay to do so. What sort of disturbing message would Jane's position send to Japanese women? There's another undertone. Women, put it as nicely as I can, the way that it was referred to is women have a proscribed place in society, and it wasn't the top tier. Jane, we threw Jane into all of that, and we added one additional proviso, and that was she had total control of the project. And I do mean total control. Technically, it should have been my project, in the sense that I was the president of the division. But Jane ran the whole thing. All we needed to establish was, and you heard it in the video that Jeff showed, she simply made it very clear that she was the person all things had to come through and decisions would be referred to her, and she made that happen. Now, I know a lot of project managers over the years, and not very many of them had that kind of capability, even if they were given that capability. Most of them were not. Jane had it, and she made it work. A-Cell Unit was a resounding commercial success, and the Japanese who interacted with her loved her. My friend, Kunio Takeda, who is the grandson of the original Takeda, 7 times removed. Company's history goes back 225 years. Remarked to me, we became friends, and he remarked to me that the stewardship of the project that Jane was involved in was just done excellently. All the physicians that they worked with and were very worried about her messing up the relationship with, because Takeda is a big pharmaceutical business in Japan. They found her to be terrific, would work with her again, and would hope that everybody at Letterly thought the same thing about the product, and they did. Jane was perhaps the most quietly determined person I have ever met. She was loyal and respectful, but it was her focus on achievement that was more important to her than the fame it brought. She epitomized scientific integrity and intellectual honesty. She was a bridge builder, or as I used to say for our developing business, a wall holder upper. And she did this with a civility that sadly is absent in today's attempts at public discourse. She was a hell of an individual, and we miss her.
Thank you very much, Ron, for that. Appreciate it. Next, Sharon Bosley, my sister, Jane's sister-in-law, is going to say something.
First thing I wanted to say is how interesting it is. I spent a lot of time putting together a little bit that I want to say, and I'm interested to see how many people who have already spoken before me have already used the same adjectives that I'm going to use to describe Jane. I've always felt really lucky that Jane was my sister-in-law. She always knew what to say. She had so much poise and grace about her. When we were children growing up, I kind of think that my brothers and I sort of never wanted to get married. So when Jeff and Jane did get married, I waited a really long time before I did. And I told them I wanted to make sure that their marriage really worked before I
Good job, Brad.
And I was really really pleased that Jane was a matron of honor at our wedding, and she really looked beautiful. My favorite Jane story, one that I feel typifies what Jane was all about. Brad and I were driving in New Jersey many years ago, and our car broke down. This was before cell phones, so we managed to find our way to a phone, and we called the only people that we knew lived anywhere near where we were, and that was Jeff and Jane. Jane came to our rescue, and it was like a half hour away from where they were. But she came to pick us up, and with it, she came with a picnic basket filled with wine and cheese and crackers. She knew how stressed out we were. And that was my sister-in-law, Jane. Nobody's going to miss Jane more than Jeff and Matt, but we're going to miss her ready smile, her generous spirit, and all the happiness she brought to our family. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Now we're going to hear from Jane's daughter-in-law, Kristin Scott.
Dun, 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 I'm the daughter-in-law. Oh, I adored my mother-in-law. And that's something that I want to convey to all of you tonight. I want to say how wonderful it's been to hear all the different adjectives that everybody has used to describe Jane. Some have overlapped, some have been very different, and all of them have absolutely been true. And Poppy, I got to say, you outdid yourself with this today. This is a beautiful tribute to Mom, and I think she'd be incredibly pleased. And I also wanted to say thank you guys for all the stories, and please don't stop telling them after this evening, because the best way to find out about Jane Scott was not to ask Jane Scott. Ask anybody but Jane Scott, and you will find either interesting versions of the stories or things. And she was not self-deprecating. She was a very proud, strong person, but still very modest, and she'd much rather get you to talk about you than to say anything about herself. So please, tell me stories, tell us stories. Hunter and Aiden, her grandchildren, this is a unique opportunity for them to hear wonderful things about their tutu. And so please, tell them whatever it is, except maybe the dancing naked part, which was slightly inappropriate, Poppy. Other than things like that, please feel free to share. So when, one of the things I want to say in terms of all of my accomplishments in life, Jane was a very, like I said, strong person. She was not an easy person to change her opinion on. And she was not sure she wanted to be a grandmother. She was quite sure she was far too young and too fabulous to be a grandmother. And when we asked her